John Browning, I hope it's been a great day for you so far. How are you?
I'm doing well. Doing well. I had a little trip for out to lunch, and then other than that, I've been in the office all day. So
Well, it's good to
it,
get out once in a
it's
while
good
and
to
see
get
some
good to
things.
get out like at least once a day. I try to, because there are times where you're just sitting there
Yes.
and you realize, and I've got this little thing on my wrist. It's
Yeah.
called a Fitbit.
Yes.
And some people got the Apple Watch or whatever, but it kind of keeps track of your movement. And I realized literally all day I've walked like 3,000 steps, which is
Yeah.
not like anything at
Putrid.
all. Because I
Yeah.
have a home office that I work out of, but
Right.
it's
Um,
it's actually kind of the topic we're talking about today, and how
it
you
is.
we wear these things, and we've
Yes.
got refrigerators now that already know what our groceries are supposed to be, and
Yeah. Replenishing everything. And it falls into the category that's called, AI. And the first time I read that or heard AI, I went immediately back to the Bible because there's a story in there and a battle of AI. And I thought, what does that have to do with technology? Well, it's not the same thing. But AI, I'll let you explain what it is because I'm sure you're more knowledgeable than me. And so what is it and why does it even matter?
well, I think it matters to all of us, whether we like it or not. So AI is artificial intelligence for those of you
Okay.
who haven't heard of it,
Okay.
and those of you who are, I will say, around our age, right, Michael? We
Right.
think of Arnold Schwarzenegger and the Terminator, and AI taking over the world and robots taking over the world. And it was a great movie, right? Okay, if you were a guy, it was a great movie.
That's
Anyway,
right.
we all liked it because the action, all that.
Yeah.
And it it is a bit scary to those of us who kind of realize the power. At the same time, it's also exciting because artificial intelligence can make your life better. It can make it easier if you embrace it. But then what happens if, I'm not saying that AI necessarily will ever become self-aware like happened in the movie,
Right.
but the idea of how much information do we want about our personal lives out there for everyone to
Right.
tap into. And we did a recent episode about identity theft,
Mm-hmm.
putting little pieces of information from all over the internet, and maybe even some pieces of paper you may have thrown in the garbage and not shredded. How much easier might it be for someone to do some identity theft
Right.
with AI? So there are dangers, right? Elon Musk, one of the famous guys of our time, one of the smartest guys out there that I know of, says that AI is one of the scariest things that he deals with every day. But he's at the forefront because a lot of artificial intelligence is built into not just his Tesla cars that he's building, but also into SpaceX, the Boring Company, everything else that he's doing. And he even has artificial intelligence chips that they have implanted into animals' brains that can transfer and help an AI robot learn
Wow.
how to walk like a pig, how to behave like a pig. So can they do that then? This is the early testing, right? Can they do that with human-like
Wow.
robots that sometimes, so it gets fascinating, and we can go down this rabbit hole, right?
Yeah. So the whole thing of if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, isn't it a duck, might not be true in the future then, really?
That's right. As
Wow.
they get further into it, a lot of folks just have this idea, especially those of us who live here in the United States, right? That, well, the United States is the greatest country in the world, and hey, we are. I'm
Yeah.
patriotic, just like the next guy. But if you really look at the adoption of new technologies such as AI and other innovations, you'll find that we're a distant third.
Oh, really?
And in some charts, they'll even sell you fourth or fifth
Uh-huh.
on that list. And if anybody's interested, it's China and India that are leading that charge by a country mile, so to speak.
Wow.
as far as adoption of new technologies and innovations and things like that. Um, just an
Just
FYI.
saying, just saying.
So
So AI is probably here to stay.
yes.
There are new and new. I mean, there are new technologies all the time, and some we love. You know, it
Sure.
makes our life easier. Your Fitbit watch is really nice, you know, and having self-driving cars. Somebody had a self-driving car the other day, and he was in LA, and he's a friend of mine. He's like, yeah, I just get in the car and I make email calls and stuff, and it just does it for me. Really?
Mhm.
That's shocking, but that's new. I could definitely see that being a benefit down the road somewhere. But
Mhm.
it also, I'm sure, plays into investments and things. I assume at some level, some trading aspects are AI, or who knows what it is, right?
Well, that's and really, so to make that transition, you know, one of the things that I get asked all the time, we've been in a declining market. This is kind of dating the podcast, I guess, but right now we've been in a declining market for over a year. And so where are the opportunities? And I think the answer often lies as much in innovation as it does in watching kind of where the general economy is going. So if you look at what's happening now and you look forward, you when you drive a car, you glance in the rearview mirror, but you look and you focus forward, right? I think I've used that analogy before on the podcast. So if you look at where we are likely to go, what companies and how might that benefit certain sectors of the market? So if you look at artificial intelligence in particular, what I like to say is there's a core of innovation, and then all around it are exciting things that are growing out of that core. And artificial intelligence, I would argue, is the core to everything from healthcare and genome sequencing to the blockchain and the digital currency that we hear a lot about, to how we manage energy and energy storage and autonomous vehicles, which we just talked about, and the connectivity of the refrigerator that we talked about that is now capable of not just making your list, but also ordering it from the store.
Right.
Super convenient, right?
Totally.
But that's all about artificial intelligence. So it's kind of into everything, 3D printing, any kind of robotics, all of that uses artificial intelligence in some way. So we're living in an exciting
Yeah.
time, but also a little bit scary time, because how is that regulated?
Well,
Is it over-regulated? Is it
yeah.
regulated before they understand it?
But wasn't that true? Hasn't that been true always? I'm sure when Henry Ford brought out the car, everybody was like, "They're exciting times," and other people were like, "Well, I don't know." So I think we're always in that conundrum, right? You were just saying, things. We have Rosie the robot. We have one of those Rumba thing, whatever it is, the little
Roombas, yeah.
that does the floor, and I'm like, okay, based on what you're saying, that's like AI technology in my house. I'm like, well, I never
That's
connected that with AI, but it's artificial intelligence because, yeah, that's
it
fascinating.
learns the room, it learns where it
Well, it's
is.
supposed to.
Yeah, exactly. And it's probably the most rudimentary form of
Sure.
AI out there, right?
Yeah.
But it's
Right.
great. We have one too.
Well, but it's interesting going back to the cars. I rented a car the other day. I mean, this was months ago. I was in Los Angeles or someplace, and I didn't know this, but as I got close to the dotted line, it would move me back into my lane, and it really wigged me out. I'm like, what in the world? But
Yes,
it
because we're not
had
used to it.
it
Yeah.
had some sensor thing that kept me in my lane. I thought that is really weird, but once you get used to it, you're like, well, that's kind of fun. It keeps me from having an accident. So there's a lot going on with AI that most of us don't even register,
Yeah.
that we are just probably scratching the surface right now to go, wow, what could be?
Yeah, there are probably the most prevalent thing that we're looking at Guardian Rock, that we're looking at right now, because we see a major issue coming down the road with the economy. And energy, yes, is going to be a major issue, but also food security. is a major issue because of what's happening in other parts of the world. And also, for some other reasons as well. So what's being done and what part does AI play? Well, some of the common names that you would be familiar with if I mentioned them, but since this is not investment advice, I want to be careful not to mention specific companies, generally speaking here. But some of the companies that you hear about every day, maybe making farm equipment, things like that, they are working hard on utilizing AI and everything from self-driving tractors to what they call precision farming, which is, I believe, going to become more and more and more important as we kind of get into the impact of Ukraine not having a harvest this past year, and Russia not necessarily sharing their harvest. And the fact that, in the United States, a lot of our farms have kind of been dormant for a while because of the way that we were overproducing. Now we kind of need to overproduce because we are going to need coming up to supply food for more of the world than we used to.
Yeah.
And hence you'll see that, when we talk about the CPI or the consumer price index, one of the biggest components moving higher are food prices. Well, there's a reason for that. And I just described the reason for that, but AI could potentially really help in terms of increasing crop yields. There's also AI that works in terms of how shipping happens and making it more efficient, much more efficient than a human could do fast enough.
Yeah.
In order to make a real difference.
Right. Because computers they can look at millions of pieces of data so much faster and put it all together. And that's fascinating. It's really, really intriguing when you think about what we're able to create or discover. Let's say discover, because nobody's created AI. We've just discovered it. God created everything, right? But to figure this all out and to put it to good use and say, well, here's how we can apply it. And we to be able to not be afraid of it, but to embrace it and talk to people like John at Guardian Rockwell, who, they think about these things, they study them, they read it, they can discuss it, they can see how the trends are coming and where it can benefit. And that's why having somebody like you in your corner is really important.
Yeah, and I think it's important too that, for the people who are scared of it, you're right. I actually wrote a paper on the roaring 2020s, much like the roaring 1920s.
Right.
People are having a hard time with that right now because, much like sometimes during the roaring 1920s, the economy's not real great right now. But at the end of that decade, oh my goodness, because of why? All the innovations. Well, the innovations that we're seeing now compared to what we saw in the 1920s are far and away more impressive in terms of the difference that they can make and are making and are going to make in our lives and in our productivity.
Yeah.
And I think back then it was all about, robotics are taking away all our jobs and, we need to fight against this. And, if we could fight against AI and all the innovations that are coming, but they're coming.
That's right.
And what they found is a great story. So when IBM's Watson beat the greatest chess player ever, he became that gentleman, Russian gentleman. I'm trying to remember his name. I can't think of it right now, but he became almost depressed and kind of went away for a while. Nobody heard anything about him. IBM contacted him, and what they found, long story short, was that when he actually came and he worked with Watson, the computer, that Watson could beat him, but when they worked together, he and a version of Watson could beat just the AI. So humans augment artificial intelligence, at least at this point, and for the foreseeable future. Artificial intelligence used correctly benefits from the human input.
Sure.
Because artificial intelligence hasn't learned to truly think for itself.
That's fascinating.
It seems like it does, but it needs our help.
It does need our help. Yeah. At the end of the day, it's a computer still at some level.
Right.
Garbage in, garbage out. And it's just fascinating to see where this is going to go. I'm sure we'll be talking about this in a year or 2 years or 5 years. And it'll probably have a different name, and there'll probably be something new coming along that's just now being discovered. And that's okay. That's the joy of all of this. And that's why John and his team at Guardian Rock Wealth study all this and think about all this and write papers on all this so that they can counsel and guide you for your specific situation. That's why we don't give counsel and advice on this podcast, but John can do that individually with you when you reach out to him at guardianrockwealth.com, or pick up your phone and text the word life to 21,000, and you'll get John's contact information, ways to reach out to him, a way to get a copy of his #1 Amazon best-selling book, and just start learning who he is so you can have dialogues with somebody who's very, very smart, intelligent, understands a lot of this, and can be in your corner to help guide you to build a life, not just a portfolio. So, John Browning, this is really interesting. AI outside the Bible. This is very cool. Thanks for sharing with us. I look forward to another great episode coming up next.
All right. Looking forward to it as well. We see you next time.
Bye-bye.